Hello everyone, today I want to talk about how French business executives say the real danger is not that China is copying and imitating anymore, but that they're now innovating and surpassing. Also in the US, the left is now fond of socialism, and even the right says that if China were to unify, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for America. Right now, China has a contradictory image in the eyes of the West. People who don't know much about China still think it's a copycat country, and quite a few American politicians keep saying things like this every day. But those who understand China better are starting to fear China's innovation. Today, the CEO of French e-commerce platform Rakuten Group, Dufour, published an article in L'Echo stating that for us, the real danger is not that China is imitating anymore, but that they are innovating and surpassing us. Dufour also mentioned some Chinese fast fashion brands sweeping across the globe, making a strong entry into the French market and sparking heated discussions in French society. Dufour also said that if we simply equate China with these fast fashion companies, we are making a huge mistake. He said that for decades, Europe has generally regarded China as the world's factory, producing low-cost, mediocre products that are usually imitations. However, this view is now largely outdated. He said that over the past 20 years, China has been making significant investments in innovation, striving to catch up with and even surpass its competitors. Citing data, he pointed out that China's R&D spending has continued to grow, reaching an 8% year-on-year increase in 2024, accounting for 2.7% of GDP, much higher than the EU average of 2.1%. Dufour also mentioned that China is the only country to have achieved its targets, having implemented the Made in China 2025 strategic plan since 2015. With the goal of building world-class technology-leading enterprises and launched it in 2017. There is a large-scale investment plan in the field of artificial intelligence, aiming to make China a world leader by 2030. Dufour used electric vehicles and clean energy technology as examples, saying that China's strategy has clearly been effective. China's competitiveness no longer relies solely on low prices. Its innovation and quality are equally important. In 2022, nearly half of the world's patent applications came from China. As Chinese companies have expanded overseas in recent years, the West has begun to realize the innovative progress China has made in fields like electric vehicles, wind power, and AI. Not only Europeans, but Americans as well have started to reflect on this. In June this year, Burns, the former US ambassador to China whose term just ended, gave an interview to the American political news network. In it, he said that regarding China-US relations, there is a widespread misconception among both parties in the US, from his perspective. They still think that China lacks the ability to innovate and only knows how to imitate and steal American intellectual property. He said those days are long gone. China has already become a worthy competitor. As people recognize that China is starting to surpass the US, there are also Americans who have begun to feel that China is better than the US, and some even agree with socialism. After American pharmaceutical influencer Charlie Kirk was shot and killed, the biggest spiritual leader in the industry became Nick Fuentes. He has millions of followers on the X platform, and he recently gave an interview. Host Carlson's exclusive interview video received tens of millions of views. He advocates that the world should be ruled by China for a period of time, and his remarks can be described as extremely provocative. Fuentes is only 27 years old this year, born in 1998 in LaGrange Park, a suburb of Chicago, which is a typical middle-class community. His father has Mexican heritage, while his mother has Italian and Irish backgrounds. This gave him a complex Latino identity, but this heritage did not stop him from becoming a champion of white nationalism. On the contrary, it became an ironic footnote to his story. He claims white supremacy, yet his own background is a tangled mix. During high school, he was the student council president at Lyons Township High School, excelling academically and passionate about debate. In 2016, when Trump put forward the America First slogan, it attracted him like a magnet. That same year, he entered Boston University to study international relations. But soon after, because he participated in the 2017 Charlottesville Unite the Right rally and was considered too radical, he was forced to drop out of school. After leaving, he turned to online streaming, focusing on anti-immigration and anti-globalization content, and quickly amassed a large following. In the Make America Great Again movement, Fuentes' views were seen as outliers, but he became very popular among young Americans. He not only poses as a nationalist, but also holds a complex, envious kind of criticism toward China, seeing it as a model of ethnic homogeneity and nationalism, in stark contrast to America's chaotic racial diversity. He even paints the Chinese model as a blueprint for a white paradise, claiming that China has no immigrant invasion and no Jewish oligarchs. Most outrageously, he has promoted a theory of reverse colonization. He once fantasized on his own livestream saying, "If China occupied 2 cities, what would happen? That actually sounds pretty good. I would support it." Imagine Chinese soldiers stationed at every street corner. Any leftist dissidents would be crushed by them. He said during a live stream discussion about Chinese spies that if China ruled America for a while, maybe it could restore order in the US and clean out all the trash that promotes diversity. On May 26th this year, he criticized Trump for once again allowing 600,000 Chinese students to enter the country. He said these students would replace us, but at least they are high-quality immigrants, not those low-level drug dealers. In September this year, after Charlie Kirk died unexpectedly, Liu took advantage of the power vacuum and personally founded the America First Political Action Conference, replacing Charlie Kirk as a highly influential leader. The new generation of white male stars in America, they are the key voting bloc for Trump's victory in 2024. Now they see Fuentes as their true spokesperson. At the end of last month, right-wing commentator Carlson interviewed Fuentes for a 2-hour session. The program quickly shot to the top of the streaming charts with over 10 million views. Carlson praised Fuentes as an interesting young man, and the two of them together criticized Jewish oligarchs and Christian Zionists. Carlson said that the only people left in the Republican Party are brain virus carriers like former President George W. Bush and former U.S. Ambassador to Israel Huckabee. Fuentes then reiterated that organized Jewish groups are like transnational gangs controlling America's media and finance. This interview led to a complete split within the MAGA camp. Traditional American media described it as a rift between the anti-China British faction and those involved in China affairs. Fuentes' China Dream has actually become quite a hot topic, and it also reflects the dissatisfaction of American youth with the current situation. This kind of dissatisfaction isn't just appearing on the right, it's also emerging within the left-wing camp. After self-proclaimed democratic socialist Mavudani won 2 mayoral elections on November 4th, the question of whether socialism will become popular in the United States has once again become a hot topic. Meanwhile, an email written 5 years ago by Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal and a major hedge fund boss, to Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has started circulating wildly online again. Of course, as an investment tycoon worth tens of billions of dollars, he opposes socialism. He's been labeled with many tags, including being the gravitational center of Silicon Valley, the dream of the American left, and an early supporter of US Vice President Pence. 5 years ago, Americans often attributed young people's interest in socialism to a kind of spoiled ignorance, believing that young people simply didn't understand what socialism truly meant. When Fuentes, who was elected to the US Congress at the age of 28, that is, politicians like AOC, rose to prominence, and when millennials supported veteran Senator Sanders, mainstream American society at the time tended to downplay it and simply ignore it. But Thiel didn't see it that way. Back then, he wrote an email to Facebook boss Zuckerberg, warning him that capitalism was no longer working for young people. In this email from 5 years ago, Thiel said that when 70% of a generation says they lean towards socialism, we can't just dismiss them as a foolish, spoiled, or brainwashed generation. We should try to understand why they think this way. In 2020, Thiel saw things that others couldn't see. He saw that when American millennials went to college, they were already burdened with student loans and couldn't afford to buy homes, so they turned towards socialism. Looking back at a recent interview where he talked about this email he wrote in 2020, he said the ideas in it weren't something he just came up with that year. Even 10 years earlier, in the fall of 2010, when he established the Thiel Fellowship to encourage young people to drop out of college and start businesses, he repeatedly emphasized a key policy issue. College tuition in America is too expensive, and student loans are out of control. Americans who graduated in the 1970s hardly had to deal with student loans, but for millennials, the situation is completely different. In 2000, the total amount of student loan debt in the US was $300 billion, but now it has already surpassed $2 trillion. He said that one day, this phenomenon will collapse. Young people are spending too much money on college without learning any practical skills, and in the end, they're saddled with heavy debt. This kind of student debt is actually a microcosm of the generational conflict he's always talked about. He said that this issue can explain about 80% of today's culture wars as being rooted in economic problems, and that 80% of America's economic problems can in turn be traced back to real estate. He said that nowadays it's almost impossible for young people to buy a home. In many areas, building more housing would be a good thing, but for the baby boomer generation, those born in the 1960s, it's better for them if housing prices keep rising because their property values continue to increase. But for the millennial generation, it's a disaster. When you turn young Americans into the property-less class, you shouldn't be surprised if they start leaning toward communism. He said young people have been told that as long as they work as hard as their parents did, everything will go smoothly for them. But in reality, society has completely changed, and many things no longer work the way they used to. Housing prices are much higher than before, especially in New York, San Francisco, or any economically vibrant city with plenty of decent job opportunities. Buying a home is extremely difficult. People think everything is the same as before, but in reality, that's not the case. Polls show that the main supporters of Mamdani are new residents who received their education in mainland China and tenants, as well as young people under 30. Their biggest concerns are high rent and student loans. He Yan believes that socialism can't solve these problems, and even Mamdani can't solve them either. because it's impossible for him to socialize housing, and if he forcibly implements rent control, the likely result would be even less housing supply and even higher prices. However, what is commendable about Mamdani is that at least he is willing to discuss these issues, while the establishment's standard response is always that the first step is to raise the problem, even if you don't yet know how to solve it. Those establishment figures who lean toward the center have long since stopped even wanting to talk about these issues. They sum it up like this. First, whether it's right-wing influencers becoming admirers of China and saying that if China ruled America, it could restore order for a while, or New Yorkers electing a right-wing socialist mayor in hopes of building a fairer society, both show that young Americans are extremely dissatisfied with the current situation. Second, many people are comparing Trump and Mamdani, saying that both rely on mobilizing emotions and channeling resentment to get elected, and both have very strong personal charisma. The analysis emphasizes that the reason they are so popular is because everyone else is too fake. Both Trump and Mamdani represent a kind of authenticity. It says that if people are all looking for answers outside of the current direction, then it's not surprising that these two candidates have emerged. Third, the intense polarization in American society keeps rising, and no one knows when it will finally reach a breaking point.